Today we are looking at a real data analyst interview. The candidate didn't get the job, but instead of being ghosted, the interviewer actually sent him a detailed feedback, telling him exactly where he fell short in the interview and why he didn't get the job. Right? I'm going to be reading out the questions that were asked, and I'm going to explain where I think Marvel fell short, and I'll show you how I would answer these questions if I were to be the one interviewing for the role of a data analyst. So let's get started. Question number one: how do you approach data cleaning? Now, the interviewer said this was one of the candidate's strongest areas. He said Marvel demonstrated a good understanding of data cleaning, including handling missing values, white space issues, invalid categories, and quarantine problematic records. But here's what I think you should, that would make your answer even more stronger. Instead of saying I remove duplicates, I clean I clean missing values. I rather say that my first approach to data cleaning is first of all understanding the data sets. After having an understanding of data sets, I'll explore that data set to check out if there are outliers. I'll check out if the data are in their right data types. I'll check out if there are typos, if there are incorrect spellings, and then I'll further what standardize my data. Where there are typos, where there are mapping issues, I'm going to make sure that every spelling is right. I'm going to make sure that the data are in their right data types. For example, if it's a money or a currency column, I'm making sure that that's going to be in currency, money data type. I'm going to make sure that if the IDs in the column and the IDs are not in text data type by a number data type, I'm going to standardize it by changing it to, text data type. I'm going to make sure that quantities are in number data type. I'm going to make sure that date is in date data type, because sometimes date can come as a number data type. I'm going to make sure that I transform my data set, making sure that every column are actually in their right data type. And where they are missing values, I'm going to use the average method to fill up. But in a particular column where there are so many missing values, and first of all, I'm going to seek for approval. If this particular column that has so many missing values are not needed, then I'm going to take that down. But if not, if there are a little, missing values in the data set, I'm going to use average method. I'm going to use a like this, average method to get to fill up that missing cell. Okay. And where there are duplicates, I'm going to take out duplicates. You have to mention this. Okay. After cleaning, then I'll now validate my result. I'll make sure that the values that I have, the row count that I have in Excel is the same row count that I have from the data source. Okay, you have to explain your process. Interviewers want to see how you think. Don't just say I remove. They ask you, how do you clean data sets? How do you clean a messy data set? You say I remove duplicates. I fix inconsistencies and I replace or I delete. No, 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 no. You have to explain it. Start from the beginning. Start from your data analytics process. First of all, I need to understand my data I'm working with. I'm going to explore the data. After exploring the data, I'll look out for, are they duplicates? Are they inconsistent spellings? Do I need to map anything in the data set? Do I need to fix data type? You have to explain. They like you telling stories. They want you to tell them a story using your data. How to walk me through how you do your data cleaning. I think this is the best approach to answer that question. Question number two says, how do you use Power Query to transform data? This is where the interviewer felt Marvel actually lacked detail, right? Don't just say I use Power Query. Walk them through that workflow. You say I use Power Query in Excel or Power BI. First of all, I import the data set into Power Query, right? And then the first thing I want to do is to explore that data. I want to get to know my data, right? I first of all explore the data. What is this data all about? Do I have quantities? Do I have sales? Do I have customer name? Do I have product name? After exploring this data set, I now have working on, and then I'm going to go through each of the columns to understand the data types each of these columns are in. Are the different columns in their right data type? If they are not, I'm going to fix that. How am I going to fix that? ID column should be in text data type. Quantity, anything numerical should be in what? Number data type. And if I have a money, where I need to add currencies, I do that. Where there are duplicates, I make sure I fix that. Where I need to map, the data, I make sure I do that. For example, there are typos. If Lagos is spelled as LAG, and we have another spelling of Lagos as L-A, capital letter L, capital letter A, capital letter G, capital letter O, capital letter S. I make sure that I do the right mapping. I make sure that Lagos has just one unique spelling. I do all of that, and that is done through me exploring my data. Okay, you fix data type, walk them through the process. All right, when you have a column that needs you to do merging, you merge the columns. Okay, and then what else do? You standardize text values. You make sure that texts are accurate. For example, in a customer name column where you have a customer name spelled, some is spelled in capital letters, some are spelled in smaller letters, I make sure that I standardize that text. Okay, and I make sure that if I need to create any extra column, I do that. Calculated column in the essence that, for instance, I have quantity and I have unit price. Okay, I might want to create sales, so quantity times unit price equals to what? I want to create a new calculated column. So I do all of these in what? In Power Query. Explain everything you understand about Power Query, what you usually do in Power Query, and then you now say I validate my transformation to ensure that whatever I have as a result in Excel Power Query, I have that same result in the source data where that data is gotten from. That's how you answer question number 2. Question number 3 says, how do you know your clean data is accurate? Now this question tests how you validate your work. Many candidates clean data, but they do not know how to do data validation. I've talked about how you do data validation, right? After cleaning data, you don't just jump into building dashboard. You need to validate your data. What is data validation? It has to do with you confirming that whatever results you have in tool number 1 is the same result that you have in your source data. You have to confirm that your values are accurate before jumping on analysis, before building your dashboard. See how you answer this question. You say I compare the totals, right, in Excel. I check the row count and I go back to the source data where that data is gotten from, and I compare the row count. Are they the same? If SQL is the source data and the total count of the data in SQL is 1000, and I make sure that the total count in Excel as well is 1000. That is how I confirm and I validate my number. Okay, you have to verify your calculations and ensure that the data set aligns with the original business requirements. If something doesn't reconcile, you make sure that you investigate it before going forward. This is how you answer this particular question. They want you to explain your process. Don't just hit the nail on the head. Don't just say I compare Excel and Power BI and then SQL. That's how I confirm and validate my numbers. Explain it. Act as if you are telling them a story. It makes them more interested. It makes them know, oh, this person is actually a professional. This person really knows data analytics. Okay. Question number 4. What are mapping tables and when do you use them? Now, the interviewer mentioned mapping table because they are common in business reporting. This is your best answer. I know mapping might be a bit confusing, but just as the name signifies, or just as the name implies, mapping has to do with, let's say, location, right? Your map, right? Location. This is how I studied in my head. So you now say in a situation whereby in a particular column, let's say a country column, right? Location. So we have Lagos spelled in small letter, and in another cell we have another Lagos spelled in capital letter, and then in another cell we have Lagos City. Now you can see that you have Lagos, you have Lagos, you have Lagos City, you have Lagos cities. This is where mapping comes in. It has to do with you standardizing the text. You have to pick one specific Lagos and stick with it. So we know that Lagos does not appear in different spellings. You only have one Lagos in your column. This is what mapping does. This is how you map your data set. Okay, that's basically your best answer. A mapping table is used to standardize or translate values into a consistent format. Make sure that there are consistent spelling of Lagos in your column. That's what mapping is all about, right? Question number 5 says, how do you audit your data model before reporting? This is another question many data analysts don't prepare for. Even me, the grammar is just too much, right? But I'm going to read what I there. Before publishing any reports, right, I review table relationship. This is your best answer.
Tell them before I publish any report, I make sure that I review my relationship that I've created. Is it in Power BI? Is it in Excel? I review this relationship, right? And then I validate all these calculated fields. I validate it. How do I validate it? Is the number the same in my SQL from the data source? Is it the same? If I do count rows, the values I have in SQL, does it match the values I have in Excel? This is how I work. This is how I audit my data model. Another point you can give is I compare the totals against the source data. Yeah, I just said that basically. I check for missing records and I ensure that every KPI matches the business requirements. Every KPI that I do, I make sure that it matches the business definition. What problem am I trying to solve? I make sure that every KPI I build tallies with that, right? Question number 6 says, how would you design an executive dashboard? Now, the interviewer said his dashboard explanation was too generic. Maybe Marvel said, I use that. No. Maybe Marvel said I build my KPIs, I change the colors, I bring line. Don't be too generic with your answer. If I were Marvel in the interview, okay, I will start by saying, first of all, before building a dashboard, I need to understand the business requirements. What problem do they want me to solve for them? As long as I've gotten an understanding of the problem I'm going to be solving for the business, then I have an idea of the kind of dashboard I'm going to build. Number 1, I'm going to make sure that my KPIs show the key metrics of the business, what this business is trying to track. I'm going to make sure that my KPIs, and I'm going to be using cards for that. I'm going to be using metric cards for that to show the KPIs of the business, the key performance of the business. And the second thing I'm going to use is my line chart. This is how I'm going to build my dashboard. I'm going to use a line chart that will show trend over time, that will show how the business is performing over time, from the first of the month to the end of the month. I'm going to show, if the business want me to track, let's say in the previous year, they want to see how they are performing in the previous year and the current year, I'm going to make sure that I use the line chart. I use the line chart to check trends. And then if I want to compare values, I want to compare, let's say, products. The business wants me to track their product for them, why they are not selling more products. What I'm going to use a bar chart. A bar chart helps me to compare values. So it is easier for stakeholders to really understand, to really pinpoint which product is selling the highest and which product is doing worse, right? I'm going to use a bar chart for that. And then where the stakeholders want to see the different locations, right, that they are running their business, and they want to see what location is doing the best, I'm going to use a map chart for that. I make sure that every chart that I use is what is easy to understand. Every chart that I use, I make sure that stakeholders easily see it and they understand everything on the chart, right? I'm intentional about building my dashboard. And then I'm going to use slicers. To filter records, to filter the dashboard. Let's say the interviewer wants to see a particular product and how it's performing in different countries. There's a slicer for that. So building my dashboard, I'm going to be using line charts, I'm going to be using KPIs, cards, right? I'm going to be using bar chart, and I'm going to be using slicers to filter records. This is how you tell them a story. Don't just tell them in your dashboard, I'm going to use line chart, I'm going to use bar. Don't be too generic. Okay, that was where Marvel, didn't get it all right. He knows his tool. He's very good with his tool. But your ability to explain, to be able to, answer questions in an interview is what is going to get you that job. Trust me. You know your tools, yes. Do you know how to explain your tools? The interviewers want to see your thought process. They want to see your workflow. Tell them the story. Question number 7 says, how do you gather business requirements before building a report? How do you gather business requirements before building a report? This is one of my favorite questions, trust me, because it shows whether you're solving a business problem or not, or you're just creating a dashboard. This is the easiest. How do you answer this? You first of all say, first of all, I get to sit down with the stakeholders, and then I understand their business objective. What do they want to solve? I ask them, what decision do they want to make? And then that's where I'm going to build my analysis on. I get to ask them, okay, how often do you want this report to be sent out? So I know how to build this report. Do I do automatic building of report, or is it a one-time thing? Is it something they want to be seeing like every day? Like me, I send reports every day, right? So I had to build that data set, automatically in a way that I get to refresh, every day I get to refresh. So if you don't know this, then how would you know what to build? You just build a one-time thing, and maybe the stakeholders want to be seeing the information or the report every day. So your best approach to this question, on how you solve business problem, right, is by saying, I'll first of all sit down with the stakeholders and ask them, what decisions are they trying to make? Do they want this report to be sent out to them every day, or is it a one-time thing? And then you now know what KPIs you're going to track, right? Which KPIs matters most? You ask them. You have to ask them. They want you to do something for them. You have to ask them all of these questions, right? Yeah. How often do they want to use this report? So you know what to really build. You need to ask them this. This is how you answer this question. Okay, only after understanding all of these requirements from the stakeholders, that's when I'll know what to build. This is your best approach to this question. Now the next question says, how do you document your work? The interviewer specifically mentioned technical documentation. If you have watched most of my videos, you see where I said I document everything that I build on Power BI. I document whatever DAX measure I use. I document. This is the answer to the question, how do you document your work? So you tell them, they want to know, do you document your work when you stop working or when you go on a leave, right? Can somebody pick up your report and then be able to analyze whatever data? If you don't document your work, you're not making the job easy for somebody else who is they are going to onboard, right? So you say yes. First of all, I make sure I write everything down. Whatever report I'm building, I write my steps. Wherever I got that data set from, I write it down. I take note of all of this. Whatever measure I use or calculation I use, I write it. I write it down. Not just writing it down. After building a report, I make sure that in the next sheet I explain the process, what I did. I document everything. Where is the data gotten from? Is documented. What's the name of the data or the table? Is documented. Is it SQL script? What SQL script did I write to generate that data? It is documented, and I make sure that I explain each calculation that I did, so that anybody who jumps on that particular report will easily understand what I did and can get the job done even when I'm not available. This is how you explain this particular question. That's why it's very important for you to document your work, right? Yes, what I have here says, this makes the work easier to maintain and ensures that anyone on the team can understand how the report was built. And we do that here, right? My senior manager, my boss here documents his work, and whatever script he writes in SQL, he sends it across to us, right? And he tells us to take a look at it. Yeah, that's how you document your work. And do you know what he does? He doesn't just write scripts and give it out to you to figure it out on your own. He explains each step. He tells you this block is for this, for this, for this. This block of script is for this, for this, for this. So it's easier for you to quickly understand, okay, this is how this is done. That is you documenting your work. So your work as a data analyst is to document your work. Oh, this video is going to be very, very long, right? I'm going to split it into 3, right? Yeah. One thing I noticed from this feedback here is that the candidate actually knows their tool. Yeah, it's actually good. He has the technical knowledge. But the issue wasn't his ability of using Excel, using Power BI or SQL. The issue is that he didn't explain everything the interviewer wanted. He was too generic, right? He didn't explain his answers in enough, in enough detail. They wanted a detailed response, but I feel Marvel did not give a detailed response. So remember this, when you're preparing for any interview, my guys, don't just tell the interviewer what you know. Don't just tell them you know Excel, you know Power BI, you know SQL, you know Python, Tableau, whatever. Tell them why you made certain decisions and the value your work creates. Why do you make certain decisions? Walk them through it. See the way I have explained it. Tell them story and tell them how your work will create value for them. See, they want to know how you create value for them. That's it. That's what separates a good candidate, from the candidates who get an offer. If you see all of these that I've listed out, it's going to separate you from somebody who was interviewed and somebody who is going to get the offer. I hope you find this helpful, right? And follow Angela Data Analyst with Angie for more data analytics tips. I'll be seeing you in the next video.